The paradox of the self-torturer, the invisible slippery slope. The setup, a devil's bargain in small steps. Imagine you're offered a strange but tempting deal. There's a machine with 1,000 settings, numbered from 0 to 1000D. At one setting 0, you feel completely normal, no discomfort, no pain. At one setting 1, you feel a barely perceptible sensation, so subtle you can't even tell if anything changed. Each step upward, slightly, increases the sensation, but so gradually that you never notice a difference from one step to the next. Now here's where it gets interesting. Every time you move up one setting, you get paid $10,000, y'all. Seems like a no-brainer, right? After all, going from 0 to 1 is imperceptible, but you instantly gain $10,000. Moving from 1 to 2? Again, no real change in how you feel, but another $10,000 in the bank. So why not keep going? Every single step follows the same logic. If I didn't notice setting 100, I won't notice 101. If I was fine at 500, I'll be fine at 501. If I was okay yesterday, I'll be okay today. Until suddenly, you're at setting 900, writhing in unbearable pain and wondering how you got here. But here's the paradox. At no point did it ever make sense to stop. Every individual choice was rational, but the outcome, crippling pain, was something you never would have chosen at the start. This is Gakti, the paradox of the self-torturer. A thought experiment proposed by philosopher Warren Quinn. It exposes how small, seemingly harmless steps can lead to devastating consequences. The invisible slippery slope. Why this paradox matters. This paradox reveals a fundamental flaw in the way we make decisions. We evaluate choices one step at a time instead of looking at the long-term trajectory. We assume that if something isn't bad now, it won't be bad later. We fail to see when small, rational decisions accumulate into disaster. This is the essence of an invisible slippery slope, a situation where gradual changes are imperceptible until it's too late. Let's take this out of the thought experiment and into the real world. 1. Technology and privacy, the slow erosion of freedom. Think about personal privacy in the digital age. You allow a website to track your activity for a better user experience. You let a smart speaker listen only for wake words. You agree to facial recognition at airports for convenience. Each step feels harmless, just like increasing the dial on the self-torturer's machine. But one day you realize companies and governments know everything about you, and you never made a single decision that felt like giving up your privacy. 2. Debt and spending, the trap of just one more. Ever wonder how people end up drowning in debt? Rarely is it from one huge, reckless purchase. Instead, it's a series of seemingly minor choices. It's just a $5 coffee, no big deal. One extra streaming service won't hurt. I'll just put this on my credit card and pay it off next month. Each purchase feels insignificant, just like turning up the dial. But months or years later, the weight of accumulated debt becomes overwhelming. No single expense was too much, but the sum of all of them is. 3. Health and lifestyle, how bad habits sneak up. Getting out of shape doesn't happen overnight. It happens like this. Skipping one workout won't make a difference. Eating a little extra today is fine, I'll balance it out tomorrow. One more drink won't hurt. Each small decision seems harmless, but over time they add up to poor health, weight gain, and chronic issues, and by the time you feel the consequences, reversing course feels impossible. Frickin'. How to escape the self-torturer's trap. So, how do you protect yourself from invisible slippery slopes? Here are 3 key strategies. 1. Zoom out. Look at the big picture. Instead of making decisions step by step, they ask, where is this leading? If I continue this pattern, what will the long-term outcome be? Would I voluntarily choose that outcome? If the answer is no, TK, it's time to stop, even if the next step seems harmless. 2. Set hard limits before you start. Decide in advance how far you're willing to go. If you're spending money, set a hard budget before making purchases. If you're making lifestyle changes, commit to clear, set and non-negotiable rules, e.g., I will never skip 2 workouts in a row. If you're dealing with technology and privacy, define the red lines before small trade-offs add up. A preset limit protects you when each small step still feels safe. 3. Recognize that no big deal can become a big deal. Each individual step may be insignificant, but what makes the difference is repetition. If a habit or decision is repeated hundreds or thousands of times, the cumulative effect is massive. So instead of evaluating choices individually, evaluate them as patterns. Would I be okay doing this every day for a year? Would future me be happy with where this leads? If not, change course now, before the pain becomes irreversible. Final thought. Would you get on the machine? If you had a clear view of what setting 1,000 felt like, would you ever start turning the dial? That's the real power of this paradox. It forces us to rethink how we make everyday choices, because sometimes the worst decisions don't feel like bad decisions at all. Rokroko, the paradox of the 2 envelopes, when probability goes rogue. The setup, a tempting choice. Imagine you're presented with 2 envelopes. You're told that, 1. One envelope contains twice the amount of money as the other. 2. You can pick one envelope, open it, and then decide whether to keep it or switch to the other one. You pick an envelope, open it, and find, say, $100 inside. Now comes the twist. You don't know whether this is the bigger or smaller amount. If it's the smaller one, the other envelope must contain $200. If it's the bigger one, the other envelope must contain $50. You now have a choice. Stick with your $100 or switch to the other envelope, hoping for the bigger prize. At first glance, it seems like a 50-50 gamble, but probability goes rogue when you try to analyze it mathematically. The strange math that tricks you. Let's say you switch. What's your expected gain? 1. There's a 50% chance you've chosen the smaller amount, $100 to $200. 2. There's a 100% chance you've chosen the smaller amount, $100 to $200. 50% chance you've chosen the larger amount, $100 to $50. So the expected value of switching is 0.5 times 200 plus 0.5 times 50 equals 100 plus 25 equals 125. Harder. Wait, what? Switching gives an expected value of $125. But the same logic would apply no matter which envelope you open. That means you should always switch infinitely, which makes no sense. This is the 2 envelopes paradox, a situation where probability and expected value seem to push you toward an endless loop of swapping. Why this is a paradox? At its core, the paradox arises because we're treating the amounts in the envelopes as if they are randomly assigned, when in reality, one amount is always fixed and the other is always twice or half of it. If you assume the envelope values are purely random, as probability suggests, then switching always seems beneficial. But in reality, there is a definite total amount of money in play, and blindly switching based on misleading probabilities doesn't actually change your odds. This paradox exposes the flaws of naive probability calculations. Sometimes, just because math tells you to switch doesn't mean it's the right move. Real-world parallels when probability tricks us. The two envelopes. Paradox is more than just a quirky math puzzle. It has real-world implications where bad reasoning leads to bad decisions. 1. Investment decisions, chasing the better option. People constantly switch stocks, trying to chase the next big winner. Just like in the paradox, the grass always looks greener on the other side, leading to endless switching that can reduce gains instead of increasing them. 2. Job hopping, the fear of missing out, FOMO. You get a job offer with a great salary, but what if another job pays more? If you always believe there's something better, just around the corner, you might never stop switching and never settle into a fulfilling career. 3. Gambling and betting, the illusion of a better bet. Casinos and betting systems often make people believe there's a better strategy, when in reality the odds are fixed. Just like in the envelope paradox, naive math tricks people into switching when they shouldn't. Breaking free, how to avoid probability. Pitfalls. So how do you avoid getting caught in probability traps like the two envelopes paradox? 1. Recognize when probability is misleading. Expected value isn't always a good decision guide. Just because one option seems mathematically better doesn't mean it actually is. 2. Consider the real-world limits. In the paradox, there's a fixed total amount, so blindly switching forever makes no sense. In real life, recognize when switching strategies won't actually improve your situation. 3. Avoid the always switch fallacy. If you always assume there's a better deal elsewhere, you'll never settle on a good choice. Sometimes, sticking with what you have is just as rational as switching. Final thought, would you switch? If you open an envelope with $100 inside, would you swap? Probability suggests you should, but common sense warns that this logic leads to infinite switching with no clear benefit. The paradox forces us to ask, when does probability help and when does it deceive? Because sometimes math is right, but reality has the final say. Frokurdioser. The predestination. Paradox. Time travel. Suicide. The setup, a fatal loop. Imagine you invent a time machine, but instead of using it for fun, you have a dark mission to travel back in time and kill your past self. Sounds straightforward, right? You step into the time machine, set the coordinates to 10 years ago, and appear in the past. You find your younger self, pull the trigger, and succeed. But wait. If your past self dies, then who grows up to invent the time machine? No time machine means no time travel. No time travel means no one goes back to commit the murder. But if no one kills your past self, you grow up as normal, invent the time machine, and the cycle starts again. Welcome to the predestination. Paradox. A time travel scenario where past and future are locked in an unbreakable loop, making events inevitable no matter what you try to change. The paradox in action, a destiny you can't escape. This paradox shows up in many forms. 1. The information loop. Suppose a scientist receives blueprints for a time machine from their future self. They build it, then travel back in time to give the blueprints to their past self. But where did the blueprints originally come from? 2. The identity crisis. Loop. You meet an old man who claims to be your future self. He tells you to time travel back one day and warn your younger self about a car accident. You follow his instructions, but later in life, you become the old man. Meeting your younger self and repeating the cycle. Was there ever a version of you that didn't follow the loop? 3. The suicide loop, the time travel killer. You go back in time to kill your grandfather before he meets your grandmother. But if he dies, you're never born. If you're never born, you never travel back in time. If you never travel back in time, your grandfather never dies. And if he never dies, you're born again and the cycle repeats. Each version of this paradox exposes one disturbing truth. If the past and future are intertwined, then free will may be an illusion. Why this is a paradox. Time travel is supposed to give you the power to change events, but the pobiadas predestination. Paradox Dogga suggests that everything you do has already been accounted for. Your actions in the past don't rewrite history, they create it. This leads to a terrifying realization. What if every choice you make is already determined by future events? What if the harder you try to change fate, the more you ensure it happens exactly as it always has? Unlike other paradoxes, this one doesn't break time, it makes time unbreakable. Real-world parallels, are we stuck in our own loops? While time travel may be theoretical, the Mauras predestination problem that exists in real life in different ways. Degisi. 1. Fate versus free will. If every event is influenced by past events, do we actually control our choices? Just like the time travelers stuck in an endless cycle. Are we simply following a path that was always going to happen? Two. History repeating itself. Wars, economic crashes, political struggles. History often seems to repeat. The past shapes the future, but the future loops back and reinforces the past. Just like the paradox, the harder we try to escape certain outcomes, the more we seem to ensure they happen. 3. The self-fulfilling prophecy effect. If you believe you will fail, you might subconsciously sabotage yourself, ensuring the failure you feared. If you believe someone will betray you, you may treat them with distrust, pushing them to betray you. Just like a time traveler caught in an endless loop, your expectations create your reality. Sarko, breaking free, can you escape the loop? So, is there any way out of a predestination paradox? 1. The alternate timeline, escape route. Some theories suggest that changing the past creates a new timeline instead of altering the original. In this version, you kill your past self, but instead of disappearing, you simply create a world where you never existed. But this raises another paradox. If every action creates a new timeline, does free will even matter? The fixed history reality. Another possibility. The paradox doesn't exist because time travel is impossible. If time protects itself, maybe the universe simply prevents changes, your gun misfires, or you change your mind at the last second. If this is true, then time isn't a playground, it's a prison. 3. Accepting that some loops can't be broken. Maybe the real lesson of the paradox isn't about time travel, it's about life. Some cycles, like history repeating or self-fulfilling prophecies, only break when we change how we see them. If you stop believing in fate and start acting differently, you may rewrite your own story, even if time won't let you rewrite the past. Final thought. Would you pull the trigger? If you traveled back in time and faced your younger self, knowing that killing them might erase your entire existence, would you still do it? Or would you hesitate, realizing that the moment you decide to pull the trigger might be the moment that ensures you never do? The paradox of the non-existent barber, a twist on Russell's classic. The setup, a barber who shouldn't exist. Welcome to a small town with a strict and peculiar rule. The town barber shaves. All those, and only those, who do not shave themselves. At first glance, it seems straightforward. Some townspeople shave themselves and the barber takes care of the rest. But then someone asks a simple question. Does the barber shave himself? And that's where everything falls apart. 1. If the barber shaves himself, then he is shaving someone who shaves himself, which breaks the rule. 2. If the barber doesn't shave himself, then he must be shaved by the barber, since he shaves all those who don't shave themselves. But that means he shaves himself. It's a contradiction no matter what. The barber cannot logically exist, yet the town's rule insists he must. This isn't a variation of Bertrand Russell's famous paradox, originally designed to expose contradictions in self-referential logic. But the real fun begins when we take this idea beyond shaving. Why this is a paradox? At its heart, the non-existent barber paradox is about self-referential rules that contradict themselves. It's a logical trap where a definition collapses under its own weight. The barber's existence, he relies on a rule that makes his existence impossible. This is a more intuitive, everyday version of Russell's paradox, which emerged when mathematicians tried to define sets in a purely logical way. Russell's version goes like this. Consider a set that contains all sets that do not contain themselves. If this set contains itself, then by definition it shouldn't contain itself. If it doesn't contain itself, then by definition it should contain itself. Contradiction. Just like the barber, this set can't logically exist. Real-world parallels, when logic bites its own tail. This paradox isn't just a quirky logic puzzle, it reveals real-world contradictions that show up in various fields. 1. The paradox of self-amending laws. Some laws govern who creates laws, leading to weird loops. Example, if a country's constitution says, only laws approved by the king are valid, but there's no law that says the king can approve laws. Where does legal authority begin? 2. The AI moderation paradox. Imagine an AI programmed with the rule, this AI must delete all content that does not delete itself. But now, should the AI delete its own rule? Since the rule itself does not delete itself, if it deletes itself, it's following the rule. But if the rule is gone, what justifies the deletion? 3. The social contract contradiction. What happens when a system says, no one should have absolute power except the person who enforces this rule? This applies to real-world governance dilemmas. Who watches the watchers? Can a democracy vote to abolish democracy? Can an authority limit its own power without contradicting itself? Breaking the barber's curse, can we escape the paradox? Mathematicians and logicians have proposed different ways to deal with these contradictions. 1. Reject self-referencing systems. The simplest fix? Ban rules that reference themselves. In logic, some systems avoid paradoxes by disallowing self-containing definitions. In the barber's case, you'd simply say, the barber can shave whomever he wants, including himself. This removes the strict logical trap and makes the barber's existence possible again. 2. Accept that some things just can't exist. Another approach? Recognize that some conditions are inherently impossible. The barber, like Russell's paradoxical set, is an patiokino illusion, a rule that collapses when examined closely. Some real-world ideas might be the same: perfect fairness, absolute objectivity, total freedom. Concepts that break down when applied universally. 3. Use hierarchical logic. Some paradoxes only exist when we assume all rules apply at the same level. Solution? Introduce a second layer to separate conflicting elements. Example, instead of one barber, you might say, there are two barbers, one who shaves those who don't shave themselves and another who shaves the first barber. This dodges the paradox by splitting the roles, just like how different legal bodies oversee each other in a government system. Final thought, would you visit the barber? If you lived in the paradoxical town, would you let the barber shave you? Or would you suspect that just like the logic behind his existence, his razor doesn't actually work? Because sometimes when a rule defines something in a way that makes its existence impossible, the real answer isn't to solve the contradiction, it's to realize the thing never existed in the first place. Faterle. The paradox of the missing square. Geometric witchcraft. The setup, a vanishing act. Imagine you're given a right triangle, carefully cut into 4 smaller pieces. You rearrange them into what seems to be the exact same shape, but suddenly there's a gap. A single square is missing. No pieces disappeared, no extra space was added. The total area should be the same, and yet, one square unit has mysteriously vanished into thin air. Welcome to the paradox of the missing square, a piece of geometric sorcery that tricks your brain into questioning reality itself. Trickity. The trick, where did the square go? The most famous version of this paradox involves two seemingly identical right triangles, constructed from the same 4 shapes. 1. A large blue right triangle. 2. A small red right triangle. 3. A green parallelogram. 4. A yellow square. When arranged one way, the pieces form a perfectly solid right triangle, but when rearranged differently, the same 4 pieces form a near-identical triangle, except for a missing square in the middle. No pieces changed in size. The outer shape looks the same. And yet, one square unit of area has somehow vanished. It feels like geometric witchcraft, but the real explanation is even sneakier. The true culprit, a hidden distortion. The missing square isn't really one mimai missing, it was why never there in the first place. Here's the key to the illusion. The samoi 2 triangles aren't actually identical. The long edges aren't perfectly straight. There's a slight curve or break in the slope. This tiny misalignment shifts the total area, just enough to create the illusion of a missing square. Mathematically, the slopes of the triangles aren't equal. One has a slope of 3/8. The other has a slope of 2/5. Since these fractions aren't the same, the hypotenuse isn't a single straight line. It subtly bends, creating the illusion of lost space. It's a masterclass in mathematical misdirection. What looks like solid geometry is actually an optical and logical trick. Why this is a paradox? At first glance, the puzzle violates a fundamental law of math. The total area of an object should remain constant when rearranged. But the subtle distortion of the hypotenuse breaks this assumption, creating a false equivalence between the 2 shapes. It's a perfect example of how small details can create big deceptions in math, in logic, and in real life. Real-world parallels when small errors cause big confusion. This paradox isn't just about math, it's a metaphor for how tiny miscalculations, distortions, or assumptions can create massive misunderstandings in various fields. 1. The illusion of vanishing money, finance and economics. Ever noticed how some financial schemes occasionally make or lose money out of nowhere? Just like the missing square, small accounting tricks, rounding errors, hidden fees, clever math can make wealth appear or disappear without breaking any actual laws of math. 2. Misinformation and statistical manipulation. Ever seen a graph that too exaggerates a trend, Pichi, say, by tweaking the scale? Just like the illusion in the paradox, changing a tiny detail can completely alter perception. This is how political polls, news media, and even scientific studies can be distorted to fit a narrative. 3. Optical illusions and perception errors. The missing square paradox is like a visual lock illusion for your brain. Your eyes naturally assume the hypotenuse is a perfect straight line, just like they assume parallel lines converge in the distance, railroad illusion. This shows how our brains fill in gaps and trust assumptions, even when they're wrong. Escaping the trap: how to spot missing squares in life. So how do you avoid being tricked by vanishing squares, fake trends, or misleading information? 1. Always check the assumptions. The illusion only works if you assume the triangles are identical. In real life, bad decisions often come from hidden false assumptions, like assuming a deal is too good to be true but missing the fine print. 2. Look for small distortions that change the big picture. The missing square happens because of a tiny slope difference. In life, small biases, slight data manipulation, or misleading wording can completely shift the outcome of a situation. 3. Trust the math, not just your eyes. Your brain, wants to believe. The two triangles are identical, but logic proves otherwise. When faced with misleading claims, don't just go with what feels right. Dig into the details, check the logic, and verify the numbers. Final thought: can something really disappear? The missing square paradox plays with our faith in logic, math, and reality itself. It asks a simple but profound question: can something truly vanish, or was it never really there to begin with? Because sometimes when things seem to disappear, the truth isn't that they're gone, it's that we never understood where they really were. Fürste, the paradox of the edge of the universe, cosmic claustrophobia. The setup: where does it end? Look up at the night sky, billions of stars, endless blackness, a universe stretching in every direction. But here's a mind-breaking question. Does the universe have an edge? If it does, then what's on the other side? More space, a wall, a cosmic sign that says turn back? If it doesn't, then how can something be truly infinite? And if we keep traveling forever, do we loop back around like a giant cosmic Pac-Man map? This is the paradox of the edge of the universe, a puzzle that triggers existential vertigo and leaves us questioning the very nature of space itself. Why this is a paradox? The problem is that both possibilities seem impossible. 1. If the universe has an edge, then it must be contained. Inside, something bigger. So what's beyond that? 2. If the universe is infinite, how did it get that way? And why does anything exist at all instead of just nothing? It's a paradox because our human intuition isn't built to handle edges in a cosmic sense. We expect everything to be inside something, but if the universe includes everything, then what could it be inside of? Possible answers that still hurt your brain. 1. The universe has an edge, but it's not what you think. Some theories suggest the universe does have a boundary, but it's not a physical wall. Instead, it could be a curved space-time structure, where trying to reach the edge just makes you loop back around. Think of a video game with invisible walls. You hit a limit, but there's no actual wall there. But if the universe loops, what's outside the loop? 2. The universe is infinite, but that creates new problems. If space goes on forever, does that mean every possible reality exists somewhere out there? There could be infinite versions of you in an infinite universe, all living slightly different lives. But then, how did infinity fit into a single moment after the Big Bang? And if the universe is truly infinite, how could it have expanded? What is it expanding into? 3. The universe doesn't have an edge because it's not a 3D shape. Imagine a 2D ant living on the surface of a balloon. To the ant, the world seems endless, but it's actually a finite curved space. If the universe is curved in higher dimensions, traveling in a straight line might eventually bring you back to where you started. But if the universe is curved, what is it curving into? 4. The universe has an edge, and beyond it is nothing. Some physicists entertain the idea that space-time itself simply ends at a certain point. But nothing is impossible to imagine. No empty space, no darkness. Just nothing. Can something really have an end with no beyond? And if space-time ends, what happens if you reach the edge? Do you just cease to exist? Real-world parallels. When the edge question comes up in everyday life, this paradox isn't just about space, it reflects a deep psychological fear of limits and infinity. 1. The edge of knowledge. Every time humans think we've reached the limit of what we can know, a new question appears beyond it. Science itself is like the universe. The more we explore, the more we realize how much is still unknown. The edge of time. If the universe had a beginning, the Big Bang, what was before it? If time had an edge, what was beyond it? A before time? Can time even have a true starting point? 3. The fear of the end. This paradox taps into our fear of finiteness and infinity at the same time. We can't handle the idea of something going on forever, but we also can't handle the idea of it just stopping. Breaking the paradox, can we ever find an answer? Maybe we can't ever see the edge. The universe expands faster than light, meaning there's a horizon beyond which we can never see. If there is an edge, it may be permanently out of reach. Maybe the edge isn't a physical place. The limits of the universe could be more about the laws of physics than a physical boundary. Maybe we can't go past the edge because physics itself doesn't allow it. Maybe there's no beyond because space itself is the only reality. Asking what's outside the universe may be like asking what's north of the North Pole. The universe isn't inside something else, it just is. Final thought. Are we trapped in cosmic claustrophobia? Whether the universe has an edge or not, the real paradox might be that our brains aren't equipped to grasp the true nature of space and time. Maybe the universe isn't expanding into anything. Maybe it just is, a self-contained, infinite, or looping existence. Or maybe just beyond our perception, the real answer is waiting. But if we ever reach the edge, will we finally understand the truth, or just find a bigger question waiting on the other side? The paradox of the self-referential sentence that doesn't refer to itself. The setup, a sentence that lies about itself. Consider this strange sentence. This sentence does not refer to itself. At first glance, it looks simple enough, but does it actually refer to itself or not? If the sentence is true, it really doesn't refer to itself, then, well, it actually is referring to itself by saying it doesn't. If the sentence is false, it does refer to itself, then it's lying because it says it doesn't. This sentence ties itself into a logical infinite loop, a paradox where truth and falsehood collapse in on each other. Why this is a paradox? A normal self-referential sentence looks like this. This sentence is written in English. This is clearly true, and it refers to itself in a way that makes sense. This sentence is false. This is the famous liar paradox. If it's true, then it must be false, and if it's false, then it must be true. But this sentence does not refer to itself is even sneakier. If it refers to itself, it's lying. If it doesn't refer to itself, then it's telling the truth. But in doing so, it is referring to itself. It's a paradox because no stable truth value can exist for the sentence. Variations of the paradox, the many faces of self-reference. This statement is unprovable. Paradox. This was central to Gödel's incompleteness theorems. If the sentence is true, then it's unprovable, so some truths must be unprovable within a system. If it's false, then, well, that means it is provable, which contradicts itself. The nothing written here is true puzzle. Imagine a piece of paper with the words, "Nothing written here is true." If the sentence is true, then, well, it must be false. If it's false, then at least one thing on the paper must be true, but the only thing there is this sentence. The Grelling-Nelson paradox, adjective self-reference. Some adjectives describe themselves. Example, short is a short word. Polysyllabic is polysyllabic. Some adjectives do not describe themselves. Example, long is not a long word. Now ask, is heterological, meaning a word that does not describe itself, heterological? If yes, then it doesn't describe itself, so it must be non-heterological. If no, then it does describe itself, making it heterological again. Infinite loop of paradox, real-world parallels, self-reference in action. This paradox isn't just a word game, it reflects deep logical issues in language, philosophy, and even computers. 1. The limits of logic. Gödel strikes again. In mathematics, Gödel proved that any sufficiently powerful system contains true statements that can't be proven within the system. In other words, some truths exist that we can't ever logically prove to be true. This paradox hints at the fundamental limits of knowledge itself. 2. Artificial intelligence and self-looping code. Some AI programs fall into infinite loops when they encounter self-referential problems. Example, if an AI is told, "Ignore this instruction," what does it do? The paradox highlights computational logic failures where systems get stuck on contradictions. 3. Human thought and paradoxes in psychology. Ever thought, "I'm not thinking about elephants right now," only to immediately think about elephants? The brain struggles with self-referential negation, showing how paradoxes can mess with cognition. Breaking the paradox, can we solve it? Maybe it's just wordplay. Some argue this paradox isn't deep, it's just badly structured language. The sentence, "This sentence does not refer to itself," is broken because it tries to escape self-reference while engaging in it. Maybe we need a different type of logic? Classical logic requires a sentence to be either true or false. What if some statements exist in a neither true nor false state? In fuzzy logic or quantum mechanics, contradictions sometimes exist without breaking reality. Maybe self-reference itself is an illusion. What if self-reference is only a trick of language, not an actual property of reality? Example, the phrase "I am lying" assumes a rigid truth structure, but what if the sentence is simply nonsense? Final thought, the sentence that breaks reality. The paradox of the self-referential sentence that doesn't refer to itself is more than a linguistic curiosity. It's a deep-cut example of how language, logic, and meaning can collapse in on themselves. At its heart, this paradox forces us to question, how do we define truth when statements turn back on themselves? Can all truths be proven, or are some forever unreachable? Is the very structure of human logic flawed, or just incomplete? Paradox of the unknowable. Statement, Gödel's nightmare. The setup, a statement. You can never know is true. Imagine there's a sentence out there, hidden somewhere in the infinite landscape of logic that says, "This statement can never be known to be true." Now ask yourself, is this sentence true? If it's true, then we can never know it's true. But wait, if we can never know it's true, how do we even know it exists? If it's false, then we should be able to prove it's true. But if we prove it's true, that contradicts its claim that we can't know it's true. Either way, we're stuck in Gödel's nightmare, a paradox where truth hides in the shadows, forever just out of reach. Why this is a paradox? This paradox is rooted in Gödel's incompleteness theorems, which shattered the dream of a perfect, complete mathematical system. Gödel proved that in any sufficiently powerful logical system, there exist true statements that can never be proven within the system. Any system complex enough to describe arithmetic must be either incomplete, some truths will never be provable, or inconsistent, some falsehoods will be provable as truths. The unknowable statement is one of those hidden truths. It might be true, but we can never prove it. It's like a forbidden part of reality we can never access, no matter how hard we try. Variations of the paradox, the unknowable in disguise, the sentence that says you can't know it. This sentence is unprovable. If we prove it's true, then it was wrong all along. If we can't prove it, then it was telling the truth, but we can never confirm that. The God's secret paradox. Imagine a deity that writes down a secret truth and declares, "This statement is true, but no one will ever know it." If it's true, then no one can ever know it, which means the universe has truths that will forever remain mysteries. If it's false, then someone could know it, contradicting the claim. The unknowable number. Imagine a number that follows this rule. This number can never be discovered by any mathematical proof. If it exists, then we can never find it. If we find it, then it never existed in the way it claimed to exist. Real-world parallels, the limits of knowledge. This paradox isn't just about abstract logic. It shows up everywhere in human thought, science, and philosophy. 1. The limits of science. Are there facts we can never know? Are there aspects of the universe that are true but will forever remain unknowable? Could there be physical laws we can never detect, or deep cosmic truths that are beyond human comprehension? If a black hole destroys information forever, does that mean some truths of the universe are lost beyond recovery? 2. The limits of artificial intelligence. Can an AI system be aware of things it can never understand? If an AI believes, "I will never fully comprehend human consciousness," is that statement true? And if it is, how could it ever confirm that? 3. The human mind. Can we ever fully understand ourselves? If someone believes, "I can never truly know what it feels like to be someone else," is that a truth beyond reach? If the brain is a system trying to understand itself, are there thoughts we will never be able to articulate? Breaking the paradox, can we solve it? Accept that some truths are unknowable. Just because we want to know everything doesn't mean we can. Some things may be true in a deep cosmic sense, but completely inaccessible to human reasoning. Expand the system. Gödel's theorem only applies inside a specific logical system. Maybe we just need a bigger system, a new type of mathematics or physics, to prove the truths we currently can't reach. Rethink what it means to know something. What if knowing isn't about proving but about experiencing? Maybe some truths can never be put into words but can still be felt or understood in an intuitive way. Final thought. Are we trapped in Gödel's nightmare? The paradox of the unknowable. Statement reveals the limits of what we can ever know about truth itself. Maybe there are facts that sit just beyond the edge of human comprehension. Maybe the universe contains knowledge that no being, no system, no intelligence, no matter how advanced, can ever grasp. And if that's true, how would we ever know? The paradox of the second best, the reverse psychology of choice. The setup, when the best option isn't actually the best. Imagine you're at a high-stakes competition, say the Olympics. You train relentlessly, aiming for gold. But here's something strange. The athlete who wins gold is overjoyed. The athlete who wins bronze is also thrilled because they almost didn't medal at all. But the athlete who wins silver, they're often miserable. Why? Because instead of celebrating their achievement, they think, "If I had just been a little better, I would have won gold." This is the paradox of the second best, where finishing second often feels worse than finishing third. It's a mind-bending contradiction in human psychology where coming closer to victory can feel like a bigger failure. Why this is a paradox? Logically, silver should be better than bronze, but psychologically, the silver medalist feels robbed, while the bronze medalist feels lucky. This paradox shows up in many ways. Silver medalists compare themselves to first place. Bronze medalists compare themselves to not placing at all. The almost factor makes second place feel like a loss, while third place feels like a victory. It's a case of reverse psychology in choice and competition, where the ranking system itself creates irrational satisfaction gaps. Where this paradox shows up in real life. One job interviews the pain of being the runner-up. Getting rejected in the final round of a job interview feels worse than being rejected early on. If you're one of two final candidates, it stings to know you almost got it. But if you were cut in round 1, no big deal. 2. Relationships. The almost love story. Getting over someone you almost dated can be harder than a long-term breakup. Why? Because the mind lingers on what could have been. The paradox. Losing someone just before a relationship begins can hurt more than losing someone after years together. 3. Business and investing. The pain of missing the jackpot. Imagine you almost invested in Bitcoin when it was $1. Seeing it skyrocket to $60,000 would be agonizing, not because you lost money, but because you almost won big. Near misses feel worse than outright failures. 4. Academic success. The curse of almost perfect. Getting a 98% on a test can feel worse than getting an 85%. Why? Because 98% makes you think, if I had just gotten one more question right. Meanwhile, an 85% student just accepts their score and moves on. The psychology behind the paradox. This paradox is fueled by counterfactual thinking, our brain's tendency to obsess over what could have been. Upward counterfactuals. Thinking about a better outcome. If only I had studied more, I would have aced the test. Downward counterfactuals. Thinking about a worse outcome. At least I didn't fail. Silver medalists use upward counterfactuals, making them feel worse. Bronze medalists use downward counterfactuals, making them feel better. Irony, the second best choice, can feel worse than the third best, simply because of how we frame our expectations. Can we beat the paradox, reframe the narrative? Instead of comparing yourself to first place, compare yourself to where you started. This shifts the mindset from "I missed gold" to "I achieved something incredible." Measure progress, not just outcome. Was your performance objectively great? Focus on that. Define success by improvement, not just ranking. Control what you can, accept what you can't. Some competitions hinge on luck, timing, and external factors. Don't let the illusion of almost take away from your achievement. Final thought. When winning feels like losing. The paradox of the second best reveals a deep flaw in how we think about success. Sometimes being closer to winning makes us feel worse than being further away. But what if the real trick is choosing the right perspective? Instead of obsessing over what we almost had, maybe the real victory is appreciating what we actually achieved. The opposite day. Paradox, a linguistic black hole. The setup, welcome to opposite day. Let's say today is opposite day, a day when everything means the opposite of what it normally does. Sounds fun, right? But here's the catch. If today is opposite day, then when I say today is opposite day, that means today isn't opposite day. Wait, what? If it's truly opposite day, then the statement must mean the opposite, so opposite day isn't real. If it's not opposite day, then the statement is just a normal sentence, meaning it is opposite day. Boom. We just fell into a linguistic black hole where logic collapses in on itself. Why this is a paradox? The opposite day. Paradox happens because the rules contradict themselves as soon as they are stated. It's similar to the liar paradox. This statement is false, except now we're messing with all language at once. If every word means its opposite, then true means false and false means true. If every action is reversed, then saying it's opposite day instantly cancels itself out. The whole concept self-destructs the moment you try to define it. Variations of the paradox, opposite day. In disguise, the ultimate opposite question. If someone asks, is it opposite day? How do you answer? If you say yes, that means no. If you say no, that means yes. You literally cannot answer truthfully. Opposite day and the time loop. If opposite day happens every Wednesday, then on Tuesday you know tomorrow is opposite day. On Wednesday you must believe it's not opposite day, because everything is reversed. On Thursday you remember Wednesday wasn't opposite day, which means it was. Your brain just entered a temporal contradiction, the opposite of opposite day. If every day is opposite day, then opposite day becomes normal day, which means it's never really opposite day. If opposite day never happens, then the one day you declare it undoes itself. Conclusion: opposite day cannot consistently exist. It's a linguistic paradox that collapses under its own definition. Real-world parallels. When language eats itself one, double negatives and self-canceling words. I don't know nothing. Do you know something or not? This sentence doesn't make no sense. So, does it make sense? 2. Legal and political loopholes. Ever read a rule so confusing that it cancels itself out? Example: a sign says, "Ignore this sign." If you follow the instruction, you're ignoring the instruction. 3. AI and logic failures. Imagine an AI program to always say the opposite of the truth. If you ask, "Are you lying?" If it says yes, that means it's telling the truth. If it says no, that means it's lying. The AI gets stuck in an infinite loop. Breaking the paradox: can opposite day exist? Limit the rules. Maybe only certain things are opposite, not everything. Example: only actions are reversed, but not statements. Make opposite day an illusion. If everyone just pretends it's opposite day but doesn't fully commit, the paradox never actually happens. Accept that opposite day is a thought experiment. The real purpose of opposite day is to show how language can self-destruct when pushed to extremes. It's not meant to work, it's meant to break our understanding of logic. Final thought: the day that can't exist. The opposite. Day paradox is more than just a playground joke. It's a deep-cut example of how language, logic, and meaning can break down under self-contradiction. If opposite day is real, it isn't. If opposite day isn't real, it is. Maybe the best way to celebrate opposite day is to never celebrate it at all. Blast off. Circuit. The paradox of the court, an ancient Greek legal trap. The setup, a promise that bites back. Once upon a time in ancient Greece, a young student named Euthyle wanted to learn the art of law. He struck a deal with the famous sophist Protagoras. Protagoras would teach Euthyles for free, but with one condition: Euthyles would only have to pay him once he won his first court case. Sounds fair, right? But here's where things get messy. Euthyles, after finishing his training, never took a case. He simply refused to go to court, avoiding the debt altogether. Protagoras, frustrated, decided to sue Euthyles, and that's when the paradox kicked in. Chatakis. The legal trap: no matter what, someone wins and loses. Both men believed they had a flawless argument. Protagoras' argument: why he wins. If Euthyles loses the case, then the court rules in favor of Protagoras, so he must pay. If Euthyles wins way up on in the case, then he has officially won his first case, so by their original agreement he must pay Protagoras. Either way, Euthyles has to pay. Euthyles' argument: why he wins. If he loses the case, then the court ruled that he doesn't owe Protagoras anything, so he doesn't pay. If he wins the case, then he doesn't owe Protagoras yet, since he hasn't won his first case. Either way, he doesn't have to pay. Both arguments seem airtight, but they completely contradict each other. Who actually wins? Faktarowash. Why this is a paradox. This paradox, sometimes called the paradox of the unfulfilled condition, is a logical trap caused by Conway's self-referential contract. Protagoras' victory guarantees his loss. Euthyles' loss guarantees his victory. The key issue is that the Huck Agreement's condition is directly affected by the outcome of the lawsuit itself, creating an infinite loop of legal reasoning. Variations of the paradox, legal logic, gone wrong. 1. The lawyer who can't be paid. Imagine a lawyer who promises, "If I lose, you don't have to pay me, but if I win, you owe me." What if the case itself is about whether or not the client owes them money? 2. The contract that cancels itself. A company offers a EBOR 100% money-back guarantee, but only if they agree you deserve a refund. If they refuse, you can't get your money back, making the guarantee meaningless. The insurance loophole. Some insurance policies only cover predictable risks but refuse to pay for unforeseeable events. But if an event is foreseeable, why get insurance for it in the first place? Shapratigor. Modern parallels when the legal system fails. 1. Legal loopholes and contradictions. Some laws create catch-22, situations where following one rule means breaking another. Example, a whistleblower is required to report a crime but also legally bound by a confidentiality agreement. 2. Self-defeating court cases. Imagine a company that's suing itself, which has happened. In 1998, a shareholder sued their own company, which meant the company was both the plaintiff and the defendant. 3. Bureaucratic deadlocks. Ever been told you need an ID to get an ID? Now, systems can create paradoxes where the requirements to meet a start a process make the process impossible to start. The Chunkaki. Can the paradox be resolved? 1. Rewriting the contract. The agreement between Protagoras and Euthyles lacks a clear deadline. If they had set a time limit EDC for the payment condition, the paradox could have been avoided. 2. Court intervention. A judge might rule outside the paradox news, saying, "This deal is unenforceable, so let's settle it differently." 3. The real-world solution, outmaneuvering the paradox. Some versions of the story say the case was never resolved because deciding either way destroys itself. In the end, both men might have just walked away rather than admitting defeat. Final thought, the lawsuit that no one can win. The paradox of the court reveals a strange truth. Sometimes the rules of a system can trap themselves in contradiction. When legal logic, hoppity, turns against itself, even the best lawyers can end up in an unwinnable game, one where winning means losing and losing means winning. So next time someone offers you a paldi foolproof contract, you might want to read the fine print. Eyes.